A warm greeting to everyone. Welcome once again to the lectures of this self-knowledge course. In the conference we will study today, we are going to review some of the aspects that may be preventing us from obtaining positive results in the different practices related to self-knowledge, since this is a completely practical path. In these conferences, we receive the theoretical part of the practices. However, if we truly want to experience progress on our personal and inner esoteric path, we must practice with perseverance and discipline. The essential point, beyond intellectually understanding the theoretical aspects of this path, is to actually obtain results in the practices. And why is this so important? In these conferences, we can study the purpose of our existence on this planet, the number of cycles granted to us as opportunities to achieve self-realization, our passage through the different kingdoms of nature, the number of existences with a human physical body in each cycle, the processes of physical death, evolution and involution, and many other topics. Yet, if we do not verify this information for ourselves through astral projection or transcendental meditation, it will remain nothing more than a useless concept in our minds. On the other hand, when we manage to perform these practices and begin to connect with our inner being, and this connection allows us to verify and corroborate these truths, we start to become conscious of the real meaning of this existence beyond any concept. Then, this knowledge ceases to be a theory and becomes a living truth within us. In the same way, here we learn, and we have spoken extensively about our psychology and about how our psychological defects have trapped our consciousness, constantly leading us to make mistakes, to live a recurring destiny, and to generate karma. But if we do not practice psychological death from moment to moment, through self-observation and reflective meditation, all of this will remain mere theory. And theory alone will never free us from the psychological confinement in which we find ourselves due to our ego. Only constant practice can accomplish this. The same applies to the practice of suprasex. We may reflect and gain some awareness of the value of our energy and the necessity of creating ourselves internally. However, if we do not practice suprasex consistently, and if we do not work on purifying this practice in order to avoid sexual falls, and to develop the capacity to always make our sexual energy ascend through the spine during sexual practice with our partner, then we will merely possess very valuable information in our minds that is of no real use, because we do not put it into practice. Thus, as we can see, what truly matters is not only practicing, but practicing with diligence and perseverance until we begin to achieve success in each of the practices. All the practices that we have taught since the beginning of the course, as well as those we will teach in the future, produce positive results. Therefore, if we find ourselves blocked in any of these practices, what matters most is to review which aspects are preventing us from succeeding. Today, we are going to examine the 4 aspects that most commonly lead us to failure in our practices, so that we can identify which of them are causing us to stumble, correct them, and begin to obtain positive results in the practices we carry out. The first aspect that leads to failure in practice is lack of concentration. We are concentrated when consciousness is focused on the action. If our consciousness is our particular God, then it never fails. Therefore, when we focus our consciousness on what we are doing and do not allow ourselves to be distracted, this has tremendous power. However, the most common reason for not obtaining good results in a practice is precisely our lack of concentration and the ease with which we allow ourselves to be distracted by anything we see or by the thoughts that arise in our mind. In Conference 21, where we spoke about concentration and relaxation, we gave many guidelines on how to learn to concentrate at all times. This is because, in order to develop concentration, we must make the effort to be present, alert, and focused at every moment. We must strive to be fully concentrated in everything we do, since it is our consciousness that must carry out each activity of our daily life. Otherwise, we continue acting mechanically, while we fantasize in our mind with all the projections of the ego, or while we try to do 1,000 things at the same time without truly paying attention to any of them. In other words, we cannot wait for the moment when we are about to perform an esoteric practice in order to learn how to concentrate. Learning to concentrate is an exercise that must be practiced at all times. This produces extraordinary results because concentration is the power that allows us to succeed in anything we undertake. So, how do we achieve concentration? Before any activity we are about to carry out, the first step is to establish our goal in our heart, to be clear in our mind about what we are going to do and what we want to achieve by doing it. In this way, we enter into the activity in a state of awareness of our objective. The second step is always to place inner resolve into what we are about to do. When we have the inner resolve to act, we act, but when it is lacking, the will finds it difficult to move. Once this inner resolve is established, we begin the activity. Now, what do we do with all the thoughts and emotions that begin to appear as soon as we try to remain focused on something? We eliminate them by making a request to our Divine Mother. Each time we eliminate any detail, thought, emotion, desire, tension, or distraction, we return to our heart in order to remain focused on our goal. Every time something arises in our mind to distract us, we eliminate it and return once again to what we are doing. In this way, we remain focused until we successfully complete the activity. For this reason, it is essential to understand how important it is to carry out each activity of our day in a concentrated manner, because this is how we exercise and develop the ability to remain focused when performing an esoteric practice. We will see that, for this purpose, it is very helpful to always prepare a schedule of the activities we need to carry out throughout the day. Having this organization makes it easier for us to dedicate ourselves fully to each task with concentration, without becoming distracted by thinking about other things we still have to do, and without having to plan them while we are engaged in something else. In addition, having order allows us to make better use of our time. Something that is highly recommended is that when we prepare our daily schedule, we first assign specific times to the different esoteric practices we will perform during the day, so that matters related to personality do not end up occupying all of our time. Let us also recall, from Conference 21, some important points we must take into account in order to develop concentration. The first is to always make the effort to do one thing at a time. While carrying out an activity, we should not think about anything else, but instead keep our mental energy focused on the task at hand. We should avoid interrupting what we are doing in order to begin something else, and make the effort to finish the activity we have started before moving on to the next one. Likewise, we should not begin thinking about the things we will need to do later, because this pulls us out of the present moment and out of a state of alertness and concentration. Nor should we dwell on things that have already been done, since this also removes us from concentration and from the present moment, unnecessarily taking us into the past. The key is to remain focused on what we are doing. In this way, we will achieve concentration both during the practices we perform and in anything we undertake throughout the day. Let us now move on to review the second aspect that causes us to fail in the practices. The second aspect that leads us to failure in practice is lack of faith. When we are filled with doubts about something, it is very difficult for us to have the right inner disposition to carry it out. Therefore, in order to perform any practice, we must transcend the skepticism and confusion produced by all the concepts we may hold in relation to that practice. We must do this so that we can encourage ourselves to practice, verify the experience for ourselves, and in this way develop conscious faith. It is important to clarify that when we speak of conscious faith, we are clearly distinguishing it from blind faith, which consists simply of believing in something because someone else said it or because everyone believes it. Conscious faith, on the other hand, is the faith that arises as a result of direct experience and personal verification. And the opposite of faith is doubt. Doubt is truly our worst enemy, because when it appears, we fail. Doubt always persuades us to do nothing. We must clearly understand that doubt seeks only to prevent us from obtaining results. It robs us of our inner resolve and keeps us trapped in mental hesitation about whether we should act or not, until it finally convinces us not to act at all. Therefore, the only way to develop and nourish faith is to set the mind aside and begin to act. A person who has already done something truly knows it, and when one knows something through experience, doubt no longer exists. Thus, if we have doubts about whether astral projection is possible, or whether we will be able to perform transcendental meditation, or whether we will be capable of teaching, or whether it is truly possible to transmute sexual energy through the practice of suprasex, as long as those doubts remain, we will never truly know. However, if we overcome the state of doubt, if we eliminate those concepts from the mind, achieve inner silence, establish the right inner disposition, and carry out the practice, then we will succeed. And this success will give rise to conscious faith in the practice. Once we consciously manage to unfold ourselves into the astral plane and experience ourselves moving at will in the fifth dimension, floating or flying freely with our molecular body, conscious faith in that practice is already established. At that point, ignorance and doubt have been overcome, and faith has been achieved. For this reason, it is essential to understand that faith is nourished by works. Let us now turn to the third aspect that leads us to failure in the practices. The third aspect that leads us to failure in practice is fear. Fear is another factor that prevents us from acting. Fear makes people incompetent and helpless. When a person is afraid, they do not act. The force of fear is opposed to the force of love, and love is expressed through our actions. Let us look at an example. Imagine a building close to where we are, and imagine that we connect it to our position with a tempered steel platform, about 6 inches above the ground. We add handrails to this platform so that everything is safe and secure. From there, each of you would walk along this steel platform holding the handrails, walking on a carpet only 15 centimeters above the ground. Do any of you imagine that you would be unable to walk there? Everyone assumes they could, right? Now let us imagine the same situation, but 400 feet above the ground. We place the same steel platform with the same carpet and handrails, and we ask you to walk across it. Would you do it? Very few of you would. Why? Because fear would immediately enter our imagination. And as long as we do not resolve our fears, as long as we identify with mechanical imagination, our willpower will never be put into action. Fear is nourished by mechanical imagination, and as long as imagination is not resolved, the will cannot function. If we do not overcome our fears, we will not be able to consciously astral project, we will not be able to meditate, we will not be able to transmute our sexual energy, and so on. This happens because we lose willpower, which is what allows us to do anything. So, what must we do to overcome fear? We must observe, comprehend, and eliminate all the details of fear that prevent us from acting. We must also observe who is operating behind mechanical imagination. Once we discover the psychological defect that projects all kinds of terrifying scenarios into our imagination, and we dismantle its concepts through psychological death, and eliminate all of its emotional manifestations, and also observe on the instinctive level everything it causes us to feel in the skin and throughout the body, and eliminate it there as well, then we free ourselves from fear. At that point, we regain the proper inner resolve to act and to succeed. Let us now move on to examine the fourth aspect that leads us to failure in the practices. The fourth aspect that leads us to failure in practice is the objective, either having no objective at all or having an incorrect one. Why is having an objective so important? Because when we have a clear and well-defined objective, it becomes much easier to focus all of our efforts on achieving it. But when we lack a defined objective, or when our objective is vague, we end up wandering without ever obtaining a successful result. Let us illustrate this with a simple example. Imagine a ship that leaves a port with a clear and well-defined destination. The crew knows exactly where the ship is going. In that case, even if difficulties arise along the way, the ship will most likely reach its destination because everyone is moving in the same direction. Now imagine a different situation. The ship is fully prepared. It has fuel, supplies, and a complete crew on board. Everything is ready to set sail. The crew asks the captain, "Shall we depart?" And the captain replies, "Yes, let's go." Then the crew asks, "Where are we heading?" And the captain answers, "I don't know. We'll decide along the way." What would happen next? One sailor would say, "Let's go east." Another would say, "No, let's go west." Another would suggest we should go north, and someone else would insist south would be better. Very soon, confusion would arise, arguments would begin, and the ship would end up drifting without direction, consuming fuel, time, and effort, without ever truly going anywhere. Not because the ship lacked resources, but because it lacked a defined objective. The same thing happens with our practices. When we do not establish a clear objective, our energy becomes scattered, our efforts lose direction, and the practice does not produce results. But when we clearly define what we want to achieve, all of our forces align toward that goal, and success becomes possible. For example, when we practice astral projection, we must always have a clear and well-defined objective that we truly want to accomplish. This could be visiting the karma court, investigating a recurrence or a past life, speaking with a specific master, deepening our study of a particular psychological defect, or any other objective we consider important. We need to have a defined direction, a clear course of action. For this reason, before carrying out a practice, we must first define our objective by asking ourselves, what is my objective? For example, if you're going to practice astral projection, ask yourself, what objective will I pursue once I am conscious in the astral plane? And once you establish an objective, you must reflect on whether it is something you truly wish to achieve. If, for instance, we decide that our objective is to consciously enter the astral plane in order to meet with a master, we must reflect further and ask ourselves, why do I want to speak with this master? We must be clear about what we intend to ask. We cannot simply present ourselves and say, "Hello, master. How are you? What's new?" as we might do on the physical plane when meeting someone casually. We must always define our objective in advance and establish it clearly, making sure it is something we genuinely desire to accomplish. The stronger our desire to reach that objective, the greater the inner resolve we will place into the practice. And having the right inner disposition is essential for success. It is important, then, that each of you study which of these 4 aspects may be causing you to fail. Do you lack concentration? Do you have faith? Or is doubt preventing you from acting? If you discover fear, you must beseech your Divine Mother to eliminate it. And finally, make sure you have a clear objective. If you apply these points correctly, you should no longer fail. To conclude today's topic, I would like to remind you that there are 4 fundamental rules that every student of esotericism must know. Knowing how to long, knowing how to dare, knowing how to do, and knowing how to keep silent. What does it mean to know how to long? To long is to desire, and desire is the source of all strength. What does it mean to know how to dare? To dare means to begin acting, to take initiative, to attempt something, and to truly dare to do it. What does it mean to know how to do? It means to place the will and begin the action. You will see that it is we who place the will to start, but it is the being who actually carries out the work. Therefore, when we place the right will, we triumph, because the being always triumphs in what it does. And why is it important to know how to keep silent? Because we must never speak lightly about what we experience in other dimensions. By doing this, we gain the trust of our being, and we earn the right for our being to continue allowing us to investigate more and more and ever more deeply. This brings us to the end of today's topic. I hope it has been helpful to you. I invite you to our next conference, where we will learn how to control nocturnal emissions and sexual falls. In that lecture, we will study the psychological aspects that lead us to lose our sexual energy, as well as the attacks we may receive from the Black Lodge in order to steal that energy. We will also study everything related to sleep paralysis. And the attacks carried out by witches and black magicians through the 4th dimension and during dreams. In addition, we will examine certain external factors that can also prevent us from achieving perfect chastity. Thank you very much for attending today's lecture. Until next time.